According to The Atlantic in 2014, two studies have found that at least 40% of police officer families experience domestic abuse. Imagine being pulled over for speeding when you're sexually assaulted. This is what happened to a woman in Pennsylvania, according to CNN. Defunding the police would make these instances less common. Therefore, I affirm the resolution that a substantial portion of police department funding should be reallocated to community services. I have three reasons for why we should reallocate funds to community services. My first reason is because it would make communities safer. My second reason is that it's a better use of taxpayer money. And my third reason is that policing has a history of white supremacy. My first reason for why we should reallocate funds to community services is because it would make our communities safer. This is because police are not trained to deal with the situations that they come into contact on a day-to-day basis. According to Brookings.edu, 9 out of 10 calls for service are nonviolent encounters, but the police at times are escalating these nonviolent situations to make them violent. In addition, police officer skills are often out of sync with the social interactions that they may have. According to Business Insider, Camden, New Jersey disbanded its police department and the crime fell 48%. These are all examples for why our communities would be safer if our police were defunded. My second reason for why we should reallocate funds to community services is because it's a better use of taxpayer money. This is because increasing funds does not significantly impact the crime rate. According to Brookings.edu, the Los Angeles Police Department has $1.7 billion, and the crime rate is 95% higher than all the other cities. Brookings.edu found a study from Brookings.edu that took place over 60 years found that an increase in funding for police departments did not relate to a decrease in crime. Therefore, the money that's going to policing is being wasted and it could have a much better outcome if it was going to mental health services where people could get the correct treatment that would make them not make fewer criminals in the first place. My final reason for why we should reallocate funds to community services is because policing has a history of white supremacy and is systemically racist, something that cannot be reformed. This is because the origin of policing is slave catching. According to the New York Times, the early history of policing took its form on slave patrols in the 1700s and the enforcement of the Black Code and Jim Crow laws in the 19th and 20th century. The police succeed in keeping white and upper and middle class communities safe. However, the people of color are kept in their own place by the police, not forced to not be protesting or they would be murdered. This is not something that the police can reform, as this is something that the police have been inherently from the start. For all these reasons, I affirm the resolution that a substantial portion of police department funding should be reallocated to community services. Once again, this is because it would safeten our communities, it would be a better use of taxpayer money, and finally, policing has a history of white supremacy. Judge, I encourage you to show your support for all the communities who've been harmed by these policing tactics used, and vote pro. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Julia. If you could hold on for just 1 second, Julia. I realized this was entirely my mistake. I forgot to do something. Julia, could you go ahead and show your notes to the camera for that speech that you just used? And just kind of flip it front and back for me. All right, thank you very much. Emily, we are ready for cross-examination.
Sorry, I dropped my pen.
So Julia and Emily, if you two wouldn't mind going ahead and standing for cross-examination.
Is everyone ready? My time begins now. So your first point was that communities would be safer if we defunded the police because police are not well trained. Is that correct?
Yes.
How does taking away money make the training better?
Well, we would need to improve the training. We would need to put money in places that would prevent criminals from the first place, because that was one of my points. My other point is that there's no correlation between money and trainings or whatever, and crime rates.
Okay, so do you know how long it would take for crime rates to go down and how much they would go down by if we defund the police?
Well, I know that the example of Camden, New Jersey, in 7 years period of time, there was a 43%
Okay,
drop.
let's take a look at Camden. Would you not say that completely disbanding their police force and rehiring new police to better suit the community is reform and not defunding?
No, because they did take away funding and they invested it in education and mental health facilities, in addition to making their police departments more community service oriented.
And would this be applicable to larger cities? Like, would they be able to do the exact same thing?
Yes, it might not be the exact same thing, but they would be able to they would be able to look at Camden and take the positive things that came out of it and implement them in their cities in maybe a little different way, but it would still be able to be done.
Okay, also with your point about white supremacy, are you saying that just because something started out that way, it'll forever remain that way?
No, I'm saying that the thousands of murders of Black people today reflect the historically white supremacist system of policing, and that it has not in the past been reformed, and instead it's just been deliberately white supremacist, and that's
So
something.
just because it has not been reformed means that reform is not possible?
No,
And that's time. Julia, you can give a brief 1-second response to that question if you like.
No, because policing has been historically oppressive, and it's not something you can change. Some things can be changed, policing cannot be changed.
All right. We are ready to move on to the con opening speech. And before I forget, Emily, would you mind showing your note cards to the camera?
Just that.
Okay.
Is everyone ready? My time starts now. Riots are running rampant across the country, with looters hiding behind the facade that they are protesting for Black Lives Matter. Overpowering the mostly peaceful protests, the world is in chaos. Crime rates are soaring and the people are dying. While what I'm saying may appear to be a massive hyperbole, we are experiencing this turmoil at this very moment. Just when we need law enforcement more than ever before, people are calling to cut their budgets. My name is Emily Zhang, and I negate the resolution that states a substantial portion of police department funding should be reallocated to community services. My two contentions concern an increase in crime as well as police reform. CNN found in 2018 that in all cases of police killings, police officers were not convicted in 99% of them. More often than not, the police received justification because of, quote, self-defense. Their privilege does not stem from their funding, meaning that taking away their money does not mean taking away their privilege. Instead, defunding the police results in immediate spikes in crime. The Wall Street Journal found in July of 2020 that in Milwaukee, homicides are up 37% so far this year, on pace to break the record of 167 in 1991, which included 16 murders by convicted serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. Homicides so far this year in Chicago are ahead of the pace of 2016, which marked the city's highest tally since 1996. In New York and Los Angeles, which have seen falling numbers in homicides for years, killings this year are up 23% and 11.6% respectively. Kansas City has recorded 99 killings since January, far outpacing any record for the first 6 months of the year. Community services may help crime in the long run, but we must not ignore the immediate consequences of defunding the police, shown by the cities that are currently doing so. The people that are being robbed, the people that are being murdered, the people that are on the receiving end of the excess of crimes that are being committed, remember them. Don't let them suffer. Stop allowing for people to lose their children, their parents, their siblings, their friends. Stop letting people lose their lives in hopes of achieving a hypothetical utopian society. This ideal world is achievable, but we cannot let people die today. Rather than cutting police budgets, we should reallocate funds from other programs that won't have such instantaneous repercussions, say the military. In this case, we can experience the long-term benefits brought on by the community services while also dodging the short-term consequences from cutting police budgets. Like I've stated previously, taking away police funding does not take away the problem at hand, police brutality. What does combat the issue is police reform. We can alter the way that police funding is used rather than simply taking it away. Instead of defunding the police, we should be redirecting the funds that are used for military-grade weapons towards more in-depth training, mandatory body cams, etc. Take, for example, Seattle. As the American Psychological Association found in October of 2020, an increase of training in procedural justice in Seattle led to a decrease in violence initiated by police officers by 40%. Additionally, the NCJRS found that during a test trial of mandatory body cams in Las Vegas, policemen who wore body cams at all times received a whopping 25% less complaints compared to those who did not. The real solution here is not taking away the police department's money, but rather their privilege. Instead of unintentionally causing spikes in crime across the country, we should be participating in uniform police reform in order to deter prejudice while also reallocating funds from programs like the military for community services that result in the long-term benefits that the pro side advocates for. Judge, we don't have to pick and choose. We can preserve the present while also paving the way for a better tomorrow. For these reasons, I urge a con ballot in today's debate. I am now open for cross-examination.
All right, 2 minutes for cross.
Do you have reasons for why the crime rates were surging? Was that as a result for defunding of police departments in those areas?
Yes.
So all those cities that you mentioned have defunded their police?
Yes. Whereas crime rates across the entire country have decreased. So that increase in crime is actually exclusive to cities who have defunded their police.
Okay. And when you talk about the short-term benefit being bad, but the long-term benefit being good, do you think that having a long-term positive benefit is more important than having a short-term benefit, or like?
I'm saying that we shouldn't be choosing which one's more important, which one's less important, because we can have both through reallocating funds from programs like the military.
Okay, and are you aware that the military is a protection of our country? Like, it is. Do you know the results that would have on everyone? Is there a reason for the military not having too much money or something like that?
Because the military isn't generally a part of day-to-day life of civilians. And further, the military was just an example of a program that we could defund.
Okay. And why? And so you stated a statistic about body cameras. Could you repeat that, please?
The NCJRS found that during a test trial of mandatory body cams, those who wore body cams at all times, those meaning police officers, received 25% less complaints as compared to those who did not.
Do you have any evidence of body cameras being a measure of protecting crime, like in cities where they implemented body cameras? Have there been a drop in crime rates or by police brutality, like crime by the police?
It has dropped in violence initiated by police officers, which is why they had less complaints. And same with things like procedural justice in Seattle, like I stated in my case as well.
Okay. And so thank you.
Time's up. All right. Julia, you get to give the first refutation speech. Would you like to use any of your prep time?
Yes, can I have a minute, please?
I will tell you when the clock hits 1 minute, but the clock won't stop until you tell me you're ready to go. 1 minute used.
Okay, thank you. Is my opponent ready? Judge ready? Thank you. In my opponent's case, she claims that there would be an increase of crime if we were to defund the police. However, she claims that it would just be a short-term increase, and then the long-term increase may actually be beneficial to our community and having a less crime rate. And she also claims that we could take funding from the military to avoid having to pick between having a short-term increase in crime and a long-term decrease in crime. However, I think that she forgets what the military is. The military is protecting our country from domestic threats. So if we were to take away funding from the military, then our country would be even more messed up, because we would have bombings from other countries coming into our country while having a war with our own country, because there would be revolts with people against the police officers, while having police officers and then military, and then having other countries be bombing our country because they would not be funding the military. So that would just create a very, very big international problem, having funding being taken away from the military. The military funds goes to places where the military is stationed abroad and here. We need funds to keep educating the next generation on how to serve in the military. People in the military have a very, very big role and protect our country. And yes, they may not be a part of day-to-day life, but they would be a part of day-to-day life if we were to take funding away, because then there would be constant international threats to our community. In addition, my opponent also claims that the reforms would be necessary to stop crime. However, in the past, there have been reforms implemented. Reforms in the past, in 2015, while Obama was president, there were plenty of reforms implemented, and yet we still have thousands of murders every year to Black people by police officers. Those reforms have clearly not worked, or we would be in a different situation right now. And as far as a utopian society, I don't think people not getting murdered by people who are supposed to protect them in a democracy is called a utopian society. That is an unfair claim of what defunding the police is. No, it would not be a utopian society. Mistakes are made no matter where you are, but it would be something better. It would not lead to people having to cover themselves with and worry about going out on the street and not getting sexually assaulted by police officers and not getting murdered by police officers because of their skin color. People will not have to give their talk to their Black son just because they're going outside and wearing a hoodie while jogging. That's not a utopian society. That's hopefully just a society that we should aim for. So that's an unfair claim. In addition, my opponent started her case with looters and rioters, and that is why the crime rate is surging. Yet later in her case, she claims that the places that are having surges in crime are places where people are defunding the police. So I don't really know where she's going with that, because crime rate surging because of looters and rioters and crime rate surging because there are no police officers are separate issues. I would also like to restate my claim about.
And that's time.
Thank you.
All right, Emily, would you like to use any of your prep time to prepare for refutation?
Can I have a minute of prep, please?
As before, I'll tell you when it hits 1 minute. It's up to you to tell me to stop the clock.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, I have that as 48 seconds used, just so you know.
All right. My time starts now. I'd first like to point out some of the problems with my opponent's refutation speech. She said that the military protects and therefore we cannot get rid of them. But shouldn't we be saying the same about police? Do they not protect the people? Do you not call 911 when you are in danger because you know that they will help you? Maybe they both play a role in society. But the police is a very much more immediate threat. And she says that if we don't have the military, then the world will break out into basically World War III. But that's simply a massive hypothetical that isn't going to come true because there's no evidence supporting that whatsoever. I'd like to address some of the issues in her constructive now. My opponent first claimed that the police are not well trained and we should therefore defund the police. However, better training doesn't simply come with less money. That's simply common sense. Maybe Candom worked, but that's because they were trained for de-escalation. That's a form of reform. And even then, Candom is not a valid example for defunding. My opponent claims that due to past successes that we have seen with defunding the police, empirical evidence from Camden, New Jersey can be used as a blueprint for police departments across the country. There are, however, several flaws with using this case to predict the outcomes of defunding everywhere. First, success in one place doesn't mean success everywhere. In fact, this way of thought falls under the hasty generalization fallacy, since this claim is justified by insufficient amounts of evidence. Additionally, it would be near impossible to replicate what Camden did for every city or town in the country. When Camden was defunding, they completely disbanded their police force and constructed it. However, CNN found in 2020 that that simply isn't realistic for major cities like Milwaukee or Chicago. Instead, you see spikes in crime rates in these major cities where you defund the police, like I've proven in my case. Now, you may be thinking that 2020 is an unordinary year full of surprises, meaning that any data collected this year is invalid. However, this simply isn't the case. One may assume that crime rate soaring is not exclusive to cities that have defunded, yet evidence shows that it is. ABC News found in August of 2020 that crime rates around the country have dropped this year, yet we're outpacing years that included literal serial killers in cities that have defunded. That is not a coincidence. Judge, we have to protect the safety of the people. People are scared for their lives, and defunding the police departments isn't going to help that. My opponent said that I was confused because I was talking about riots, but then I was talking about defunding the police. But in the cities that we haven't defunded the police, those riots aren't even as prevalent anymore. Further, she said that more money doesn't decrease crime, but that is true, but less money does increase crime because each police budget is carefully tailored to each city or town. Further, reform has worked. She said it hasn't worked in the past because the world isn't perfect right now, but it was made a whole lot better. For these reasons, I urge a con ballot in today's debate. Thank you.
All right. We are ready to move on to closing speeches. Julia, you get to go first. You have 1 minute of prep time remaining. Would you like to use some of it?
Yes. Thank you.
All right, the clock starts now. You're welcome to use all 60 seconds or begin whenever you're ready.
Right.
All right. 2 minutes on the clock for your final speech, Julia.
Thank you. Is my opponent ready? Ready. Okay. I would first like to begin by comparing my opponent's world to my world. In my opponent's world, there would be a World War III outbreak because there would be no military. We need to have military to defend our country. Like we have to have a military in our world to in each country, or the country is overtaken by enemies. It would also be considered a utopian society to live in a place where you're not murdered by the color of your skin. A perfect society. That's what my opponent characterized an idea of defunding the police as. That is not the case. People should not have to fear for their lives when walking outside. And in my world, they would not have to. People, no matter their race, no matter the color of their skin, they would be able to walk outside knowing that the entire world is there for them. They have a world full of possibilities, and it's not going to be taken away by getting shot by the police. It would also be a world where we would be preventing criminals in the first place by treating them with mental health, with the correct response, and putting them in mental health facilities instead of being taken in by the police and shot. The police is clearly very flawed, and getting rid of a system that originates out of white supremacy and those traits are still seen today is not a utopian society. It is clearly just a democratic society. We're living in America. The three principles of the Constitution: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Apparently, some people here are not getting life. That is a key trait of our democracy, and giving people the right to live is not a utopian society. In addition, it would be a better use of taxpayer money. My opponent claimed that putting less money would lead to more crime, even though putting more money doesn't lead to more crime. But that doesn't make any sense because, as I stated in my study, that's not the case. Having less funding would lead to the same amount of crime because funding doesn't impact the crime rate. And instead, we could decrease the crime rate by having mental health facilities. Thank you.
That's time. Emily, would you like to use any of your prep time? You have 1 minute, 12 seconds.
I'm good.
All right. Then in that case, there's 2 minutes on the clock for the final speech.
My time begins now. First of all, in the pro world, people don't have to fear walking outside. They are afraid right now because of the soars in crime rates. My family, among so many others, are stocking up on necessities once again for the fear of crime. Giving people life is what happens in our world, not theirs. Further, we're not hoping to get rid of the military. Our country has so much more military funding than other countries combined. That's an excess, not the funding for the police departments. Now, I would like to preface this speech by saying that I will be summarizing the key issues and concepts in today's debate. I argued that defunding the police is not only unnecessary, but detrimental to the security of our nation and the people because it results in an immediate increase in crime, and defunding isn't the solution. Reform is. My opponent, on the other hand, argued that defunding would make communities safer, there are better ways to use the money, and white supremacy. The pro side advertises a world where everyone is safe and nobody has malintent. However, this world that they illustrate isn't achieved through their methods. You can scream sunshine and rainbows and pink fluffy unicorns, but that doesn't detract from the fact that people are dying right now. If we defund, people will continue to die. People are afraid to leave their homes, and I don't blame them. The world isn't safe anymore, and continuing to defund the police isn't going to help that. We win this debate on time frame because you can tell me that the world will be perfect. You can tell me that crimes will go down, that police brutality will disappear. But if you can't tell me when, how long is it going to take? How many people are going to die before we get there? If you want to experiment, use military money, not people's lives. The pro case hinges on the notion that we should abandon the security of the present in order to pave the way for a better tomorrow through community services. But why do we have to choose? Why can't we have both? In fact, we can have both. By the time we realize our mistakes in the pro world, it's already too late. The harm has been done. The people have died. So join me in preserving the present while paving the way for a better tomorrow, and cast a con ballot in today's debate. Thank you.
All right. A round of applause to both debaters in that bout. Here's what we're going to do. I'll give the judges here, myself included, just half a second to jot down final thoughts on scores and other things before we start making any comments, just to make sure we don't lose anything that we're thinking. And then in just a minute, we will transition to giving some oral feedback to you guys, just so you can get a little bit of a grasp on how we think things went for you, and some pointers we can give you for how you can do better moving forward. We'll take just a minute to get some scores down. Also, judges, if you would go ahead and share your decisions with me when you've reached them, I would appreciate that.
So I send who I voted for to you, Jonathan?
Did you send it to me in the chat?
No. Should I just
how did
no,
you send it?
that's what I'm gonna do, right? Like, should I send it in the chat, or should I send it in to like you individually?
Go ahead and share that with Ron and I on GChat.
Okay.
That would probably be the best way to do it that I can think of at the moment.
Why don't we make a big group chat with you, me, Ron, and Paul? Because we need to do this once again, correct?
Well, I already sent mine to Ron and I got Paul's. I was just trying to trying to segregate so we didn't influence each other's decision.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That was more what I was thinking.
Okay, gotcha.
We just need a record of it.
Okay, I'm gonna send it to you.
So if you could send it to Ron and then send it to me as well.
Yes. Okay.
And I have already reached my decision as well and sent it to Ron. So. And then before we make anything public, I want to give everyone, fantastic. I want to give everyone a chance to give some feedback. We have allotted 10 minutes to give feedback here. So shall we go ladies first? Nicole, are you ready to share some thoughts on how things went without giving away any decisions just as of yet?
Yes. Okay. I want to say, first of all, you guys are both really, really good debaters. This was a great debate, in my opinion. It was super engaging. I was really interested. There was some good clash. But just some like feedback, some like constructive criticism. I would say for both of you, like organizational wise, because there were some moments where I was a bit just confused at like what we were exactly like refuting for the most part. And also, okay, Emily, I have a question. So for your opening speech, did you have like two or three arguments, or did they have like taglines? I didn't really catch those. I don't know if it was just me, but was it just me who didn't catch those?
I caught some things there. It was a little bit hard to keep track of some of it as to which part was which.
Yeah. So that was my thing about the opening speech. So just like to make it more clear when you start an argument and when you're moving on to the next argument. And it'll make like us writing down, your judges writing down your opening speeches so much easier. And then it also makes it easier for your opponent to like give a clear refutation, because they can say, I'm in response to their first argument, instead of kind of like jumping around. But overall, it was really, really good. Also, I think organization, again, just like when you're responding, say, in regards to this, the response is this. And then I liked the world by world analysis. I think, Julia, you could have like been a little bit more organized in the closing speech as well. Just to make things, it makes things way easier for us as a judge as well if you're really organized. And kind of like give little categories or ways to like be able to write things down that like make sense. So like think of like bullet points, right? Or like 3 big points, and then organize those points to fit under them somehow. Everything. Overall, really good job. I like you guys were great in the cross examination. Like I said, this was a really great debate. I'll obviously put more. I don't want to get like too specific, but yeah, overall, really really good debate, guys. I was really engaged.
All right,
So
Mr. Paul.
yeah, so Emily, I actually understood your case pretty well, but I think this is how you're going to fix it. Because right now you have like sort of a normal contention, but your second argument is like a counter plan or a counter prop, whatever you call it. And that's fine. You can do a counter prop. That's actually a good strat. But you want to move that to your first argument. You're essentially saying, I'm advocating for something totally different from the resolution. I'm advocating for a third way. So if you're going to do that, you want to mention that as early as possible and make sure it's clear that you're advocating for something else. Otherwise, you confuse your judges like you did in this debate. The other thing that I would say for Julia, just one thing, and this is, you got to remember this, because some of these counter props students are coming up with, they're really good. You have to remember how to engage with those. And I didn't think your strategy of going for we need the military was the best possible strategy you could have gone for. You did okay with it, but the strategy you want to remember going forward is PERM. P-E-R-M, short for permutation. That's just a fancy debater way of saying we're going to do both. Emily is right. We do have a big military. We should defund them as well. But her plan it's not that you can't do both. There's nothing mutually exclusive about it. And if you have really pushed that line, then it would have been a great argument. You could even cross-applied your arguments and said, yeah, the military is white supremacist too. Like, we're not bombing white countries right now. And that would have made a much stronger case if you had just agreed with Emily, but you instead decided to attack it, which was harder to do.
I'll go ahead and give some feedback on my part then, as we keep moving forward here. First of all, I'll say that by the time we made it through both the opening speeches, really by the time we made it through the first opening speech and cross-examination pairing there, I knew that this was going to be a pretty fierce debate from you two. You two really went at it. It was high energy, and I loved that. I loved that you guys were really going after it. I knew that this was going to be competitive, and that made me really excited there from the very beginning. I don't want to repeat too much of what has already been said for sake of time. I will mention a couple of things just that I don't think have been covered thus far that might help make you guys even better. The first of which is presentational. First of all, Julia and Emily, here's my impression. My impression is that you are standing very close to your laptops or to your cameras, and we're kind of looking up at your faces quite a bit, almost to the point of being able to see up your noses. That might not be the biggest deal, but I think you're shortchanging yourself. You're missing an opportunity right now, because right now, all I can see of the two of you, all I can see of the two of you when you're debating is like this much of you. And I think you're missing an opportunity with your presentation style to show this much of you. You can be showing emotion and passion with this much of your body, and instead all you're showing us is this much. So if you take a step back and angle your laptop screen more vertically, facing more directly towards you, if you take a step back or 2 steps back or a step and a half back, figure out whatever that is for you in your space with your camera setup. If you could make it your goal to try to show us your body from the waist to your head with whatever setup you need to do that, that will make your presentation more powerful because you're able to show us more passion with more of your body. And that will also make it easier, especially for you, Emily. You have overhead lights ahead of you, on top of you right now. If your camera is angled up, then it makes it a little bit harder to make out some of your finer facial expressions and your eye contact, just because your face can sometimes end up in glare and shadow, just because we're looking up at the ceiling more instead of straight on like you're looking at me right now. So that's something that's kind of specific to this format, doing this digitally and over a camera. But I think that's something that will help improve your presentation even more. We have a minute or two left here before we need to get rolling. Keep moving.
Wait, can I add in something really quickly?
Oh,
I wrote this
go
on,
on ahead, Nicole.
so I like wrote this on my notes. So whenever I write down my notes of like the debate, I always like write down stuff that I feel like could use improved on as I go on. And so I wrote a lot of whys on my in my notes. So like, why does violence increase? Why do these reforms work? How come? What kinds? Like I think there are like 6 whys on my paper, and that's just the ones that were really big and pressing and important. So the easiest way that you can gain a point, especially when it's 2 contrasting points like increased violence or decreased police brutality, is like be the one who explains why, right? Or be the one who explains why the furthest and in a timely and efficient manner. And so do that and pretend we don't know anything, right? Explain it to us, and that's gonna definitely like make or break your debates. But overall, good job.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing, Nicole. As judges, we try to approach the debate tabula rasa. We try to pretend that we're starting the debate with a blank slate to a certain degree, where we are waiting for you to explain the way things work to us. So we might actually know some things about the topic because we're coaches and we're teachers and we've been coaching you guys through the topic. But you should still approach it as if you need to explain things to us in detail and articulate your position fully. And I think that's really what Nicole was getting at there. One additional thing I want to mention actually was something that came up in cross-examination. I noticed a certain strategy come up a couple of times in cross-examination that has to do with asking, "Are you aware?" questions. And I just thought I'd mention that briefly with the last minute or so that we have. The problem with asking "are you aware" questions on cross-examination is that if I were your opponent, I could sit there or stand there and just look at you and say, "No, I don't believe that's the case." And then where do you go from there? You don't really have anywhere to go from there. And what you're doing a lot of the times when you ask "are you aware" type questions, what you're really doing is trying to make an argument or cite evidence that belongs in your refutation in cross-examination and kind of stick it in there. Usually I find it to be more effective to save whatever you're asking the "are you aware" question about for the refutation speech and then use it to attack your opponent rather than trying to kind of sneak an attack in on refutation. If you want to do something on cross-examination, maybe ask them questions into why or why not something might be the case rather than asking, "Are you aware that this is true?" That way you can set it up more like a trap to see if they're able to explain something well or not, or to clarify information so that you can make a more effective refutation. That would be my advice there. All right. Well, it is time for us to go ahead and start moving forward to our next debate in the panel. So without further ado, I believe it's time to announce the results of that bout. So based on a unanimous decision from the judges, although this was a tight round and it was certainly competitive, the judges have decided that we're going to give the win to the con side, to Emily. But this was a very tight and a very close competitive round. So congratulations to both debaters. Hard fought. Well done.
Also,
We
Paul,
were excited by the things
were
that
you
we've
at the
seen.
Babson camp in 2018?